Okay, let's make this GUI from my previous video. And the reason we're doing this is because a lot of people have asked me, how do you actually make your GUIs? And, can I have your GUIs? And I would love to give them to you, but I delete them after every single one of my recordings, which is probably a bad habit, but whatever. So this video is going to focus on the fundamentals of making simple, good-looking, and aesthetically pleasing UI for your viewers. I'm going to be showing you two main tricks to just really pop out your UI, and if it does help you, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or concerns, please leave in the comments below. And yeah, let's hop into it. So to start off with any GUI, pretty simple, head into Start GUI, and we need our Screen GUI. And then what we actually need is our base. So with that GUI, there is a title frame and there is a main frame. So the main frame houses all of the information and the title frame just simply says send money on it. So we just need to add a frame, and then we're going to do a bit of resizing and positioning. So the standard procedure for getting an element in the center of your screen is to first change the anchor point. So we're going to say anchor point 0.5, 0.5. So you'll see it sort of moves it out there, but that's not to worry because we're going to change that with our position. So head on down, scroll down to position, and you want to type 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0. And there you go, we can see that we have it directly in the middle. And you're probably asking, why didn't I just drag it out? Because that actually changes the offset and not the scale. We don't want an offset value for our position because it might not look the same on other devices and it might shift a few pixels and it will look really, really strange to our mobile users, for example, or tablet users, or someone else on a different resolution of PC. So now what we're going to do is actually change the size of our shape because it's a little bit small. So we're going to be using this scale property in the size tab. So we're going to say we want this to be about, I would say, half the size on the X value. So we're going to say 0.5, 0, and then how much do we actually want it on the top? We're just going to do a little bit of experimentation here. We're going to say we want this to be 0.6. 0. Okay, so that's looking a bit too big, so we're going to head on to our X value and we're going to just type 2.5. Okay, that's still looking a bit thin now, so we're actually going to change that to 3.5. So that's looking a lot better. We're going to settle with that. But it's looking kind of bland and we don't really have a lot going on here, so let's just change our background color. And I like to do sort of a grayish, not too dark, maybe that sort of gray. And I'm not going to change the transparency because we don't need to. And you want to leave border size pixel on 0, because if you were to do that, you can see that we can make a border, but it just looks really jank and it doesn't look good, and it's just not very nice. So we're just going to leave that property. And so this is where I first introduced the two UI elements that we're going to be using for the whole video, which is UI corner and UI stroke. So what you're going to do is on every single element that you want to have these properties, you're going to head onto our white little plus and we're going to type UI, and you'll see we have loads and loads of different ones. But for styling, the main ones are these three, but we're not going to focus on gradient today because it's super, super simple, and all gradient is just adding a color gradient to your actual frame or your part or whatever you've created. So we're literally just going to focus on UI corner and UI stroke for today. So we're first going to add UI corner, and UI corner is super self-explanatory. You can see it actually already created a little corner for us on the edges of our frame. And if we open this up, it just has one property. So we've got offset and scale. And if you've been following this channel for a little while now, you know that scale is superior over offset every single time. So we're going to delete our offset value, put that to 0, and then we're going to mess around with the scale. So when you're actually messing with scale, a scale value will be anywhere from 0 to 1. It won't be any higher unless you're trying to really max things out and crank it out. And sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. It might do with position, it might do with size. But when it comes to UI elements like this, you always want to keep it between 0 and 1. So a lot of this is actually just experimentation and just seeing what you like. I'm just going to have a little test around. I'm just going to maybe put 0.25. See, that looks already way too round for me. So I'm going to change that to 0.1. See, that's looking about what I want for this GUI. But you can honestly have it to whatever you want. You can also change this to 1, which just makes it pretty much circular, but we don't want that for our GUI. And like I said before, the next property I'm going to show you is UI stroke. So you're going to add another UI stroke to your frame, and you can see it basically adds the outline. Now, what's the difference between this outline and the outline that we made before on the border size pixel? Well, that's that there's a lot more properties, and you can change the apply stroke mode. So there's two real properties within UI stroke that I really want to talk about because they are a little bit complicated, and to someone who's just jumped into it, they might not know what it is. So I'm first going to talk about apply stroke mode. So when you open up this drop down, you actually have border and contextual. So border simply means the outside of an object. Contextual means the inside of an object. but you'll see that it actually didn't make any change whatsoever. And that is because contextual and border only actually matter on a text label. So if I was to quickly add a text label here, I'll just show you, we're going to delete this in a minute. If I was to add a text label and I just added a UI stroke into it, I'm just going to bump up the thickness so you can see. So you can see we've got the border on it. This is the border apply stroke mode. But if I change this to contextual, you'll see it kind of messes it up a bit because the text is so small. But that's actually creating an outline on our text. And you can actually layer these as well. If you just duplicate them and change one of them to border and then just mess around with thickness, you can see that we actually have our border on the outside and our border on the inside. But yeah, that's just something I wanted to go through really quickly. I'll just delete that. So we're going to head back into our UI stroke and we first need to choose our color. So I don't like hitting it with a pure black because it's just sort of, I don't know, it's too sharp. You almost want to go just up just a little bit, maybe hashtag 0C. I like that one. And then line join mode is the next thing that I want to talk about. There's 3 different properties you can choose from. It will almost always be on round, which is the one you tend to want to leave it on. But if you like the looks of the other ones, you can just change it. So this is bevel. And what this does is essentially fills all of your corners. It ignores what your UI corner is, and it kind of just fills it out. I mean, you might want this, you might not. I personally don't like it. So let's have a look at mitre. So mitre is basically the exact same thing. I can't remember exactly what the difference is, but there's some sort of, I think mitre actually has a bit more padding around the sides, but you wouldn't even notice it because our thickness is so small. So we're just going to go ahead and put that straight back on round. Yeah, that's better. So now the bit that everyone loves doing is just changing the thickness. So I like to sort of go for a fairly thick one, but not too thick. And now that I'm looking at it, my color actually looks way more sharp than I want it to be. So I'm going to just change this. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter, like that. I think that'll be perfect. So now we've actually got our main frame sorted. So we actually need to create another frame and make that our title frame because we actually need to show the user what is this GUI, because we can't just present a bunch of information to them and they'll have no idea what we're talking about, because that'll just lead to bad engagement in your game and people not liking your UIs. And what you really want people to like in your game is your UI, and that is such an important factor. But yeah, anyways, what we're going to do now is we're literally just going to duplicate our current frame. So just hit Control D, and then we just have this other frame we can work with. And this is the one time that we're going to actually use these little handles here to resize our frame. So I'm just going to drag it sort of up a bit, and then I'm going to drag it in a bit, sort of like that. And then now that we've actually got our scale configured, we can just move this around no matter what, and it will be responsive on any device. So I'm going to sort of put it maybe in the middle here, right at the top. This is where I like to put a lot of my UI elements. I'm just going to size it out a little bit like that. And there we go. That's already looking pretty good. But the problem is that the corners are actually less rounded now. So let's head into our frame and change that. And while we're here, actually what we're going to do is we're going to rename our frame just so we actually know what they are. I'm going to call this one main frame, and I'm going to call this one title frame. So head into your title frame, and we're going to head on UI corner, and we're going to open up corner radius, and we're just going to maybe make this a higher value, like 0.5. Yeah, 0.5 works. And a lot of the time when you're actually dealing with borders and stuff, you don't really want to be changing the color of the borders because it would just look a bit strange if we had a red border with a black border. It just wouldn't really make much sense. Now what we're going to do is actually style our title frame a little bit more, so we need to make it stand out. Let's head into the background color, and I'm going to kind of go for a light red like that, almost kind of bordering pinkish, but just enough to make it red. So this is really coming together. I'm liking the color scheme that we have. You'll see that a lot of my GUIs actually have this type of color scheme, but it's just because I like the way that the colors flow together, and I think it makes for a really good effective UI within your games. So next thing we actually need is a title, because we have a title frame. We can't just have an invisible title. That just wouldn't make any sense. We're going to click on our white little plus and click text label. Now you'll see that our text label isn't actually centered and it isn't maximized. It's not a good size or anything. So we're just going to quickly change that, and we can do that super easily. We can just go into our size here, and we're going to use the scale property again. We're going to say 1, 0, 1, 0. And what that does is it actually just fills it out and fills it up by however much the parent frame is. So no matter what we do to this title frame, our text label will follow with it. So this text label is super ugly, so we're going to change something. So we actually need to make this background transparent. So we're just going to type 1 on background transparency. Then we actually have the fun part, which is changing the text. So scroll all the way down, and we're looking for our font face. So the first thing we're going to change is our font face. All I really use is Fredolka 1 because I just like the simplistic style of it, but you can use whatever font you want. I'm not going to mess with bold or italics or the line height or the graphemes or anything like that. All we really want is the color, the scale, and the text itself. So I'm just going to change this to send money, and I want to make this white. And you can see it's looking kind of small, but it is looking good. So what you really want to be doing is using the text scale property. So you'll see that it does look kind of messed up, but we can easily fix that. If you just drag up a little bit, it will actually change the size of your text label. So I think that looks pretty good, but we need something to make this text pop, which is exactly why we're going to add a UI stroke. So head on to the white plus, and we're going to search for UI stroke. And you can see that we already have a little UI stroke here. If it's not popping up, make sure it is on contextual. If it's on border, it will create that sort of weird border that we looked at earlier, but we always want it on contextual when we're dealing with text. So I'm just going to bump up the thickness of this a little bit, maybe to 2.8. And a pretty good rule of thumb is with all your borders, you want them to be the same color, like I said before, and that includes text. So I'm going to head onto the color, and I'm going to click this little button over here, pick screen color. And you'll see that when I'm hovering over different colors, it's actually selecting them. So I'm going to hover over our normal border color, and then we'll just click OK. So now it's the exact same color as that over there. So that's looking pretty good. That looks like it's popping out quite a bit. We actually now need to work on our main content within our GUI. So we can close our title frame, and we're going to open up our main frame. So our send money GUI actually consists of 2 text labels, 2 text box, and 1 text button. So first of all, we're actually going to make our text labels. So we're just going to go onto our white plus, we're going to create a new text label, drag it out a little bit, and then we're going to go down to the size property, and we want to make this fill the entirety of the x-axis. So we're going to say 1, 0, and then we want this to maybe take up 0.2 of the actual height. And you can see we get left with that sort of thing. What we actually want to do now is we want to go onto our position properties, and we want to type 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0. And then the last thing we need to do is also change the anchor point, 0.5, 0.5. And now you can see that it's actually centered it perfectly in the middle, but we don't really want it perfectly in the middle. So we're just going to move it up a little bit, and it will change with our scale. You'll see that our scale value is actually changing. It's not using our offset, just our scale, so you don't have anything to worry about. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit more, and I'm going to just put the scale down just a teeny bit. And now we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. We're just going to change the background transparency. We're going to change the font for Adoka 1. We're going to change the color to white. And we're going to change the text to enter player, and then make sure you tick text scaled, and that's already looking pretty good. But the next thing we obviously need is actually our border that we created before. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to go into our title frame, because we don't want to be creating a border every single time that we already have. So we're just going to click on our UI stroke, Control D to duplicate it, and just drag it into your text label. And there we go. We can just leave it at that because I think that looks pretty good. So what we can actually do now is just click on our text label, and we're going to do Control D to duplicate it and just drag it down a little bit because we've got to make space for our text boxes. So I'm going to go into the text properties, and I'm going to name this one enter amount. So the next thing we actually need is our text boxes to actually put our data in. So we're going to head back into mainframe again. We're going to press the white plus, and we're going to hit text box. Same thing as before, just drag it out, drag it into the middle. I'm going to make anchor point 0.5, 0.5. Make sure your position is 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0. And you can see that heads directly into the middle for us. So now we actually need to change the size of our text box. So I kind of want to make this take up maybe 75% of our actual width of our GUI. So I'm just going to put 0.75, 0, and then maybe 0.1 of our other one, so 0.1, 0. So now we can just move this up, and you can see it is kind of looking a little thin on the y-axis, so I'm just going to change that to 1.5 instead of 1. There we go, that's looking a lot better. Position it however you want because it will change with the scale. And now we can actually do some styling. So first of all, we should actually change the background color so it's not boring white. When you're actually dealing with UI, you tend to want to make text boxes and little other inputs. You like to make them darker than your actual background. So I'm just sort of going to go down the list here until I find one that's sort of just enough darker like that. I like that color. And you can see it sort of stands out a bit. So something else we also want to do is actually head into the text properties of our text box, because we want it to have the nice font that we like, we want it to have a nice color, we want it to have a placeholder text, etc, etc. So we're going to head into our font face, select Fredolka 1, we're going to scale our text, and we can also make placeholder text. Now placeholder text is just text that appears in your box before anyone actually types in it. So I could put type here, and you can see it appears there. Now if I was to then click on it and type, you can see that it actually gets rid of that placeholder text, and then when I delete it, it comes back. So you can sort of change the color of that however you want. I'm going to leave it the way it is because I kind of like it like that. And a quick little change I just forgot about, we're actually just going to untick text scaled, and we're going to use text size instead, which isn't very conventional, but we're going to use it for this one only because of the fact that if we have it text scaled, there is no possible way that we can make it look anywhere decent with our font face. So untick text scaled and just change it to a text size that you like. I'm going to head up with maybe 48, and then we can move on to actually styling our border and our corners. So what we're actually going to do is we're just going to take the really simple approach here, and we're just going to select both of our UI corners and UI strokes in our main frame using Control and clicking, and we're just going to do Control D. Then just simply drag it into your text box, and we already have a pretty nice border. Now you can obviously change it however you like, do whatever you want, but I personally like it like this, so I'm going to keep it this way. And then we also sort of want some outline on our text, so I'm just going to duplicate our UI stroke, change it to contextual, drop down the thickness a bit, and then change the color to a sharper black. And while I'm here, I'm also going to copy this value for my text stroke, put it over to my other text stroke, and I'm just going to paste it. So then we just have a nice consistent border throughout our text boxes. Okay, awesome. So now what we can do is actually just duplicate this. So if we head into the Explorer and just click on our text box, Control D to duplicate, and just drag it down. And there we go, now we're sort of ready. The last element that we actually have to do is our send button. So head into your main frame and grab a text button. Select it in the Explorer, and what we're going to do is our normal thing where we just change the anchor point to 0.5, 0.5, the position to 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0, and we're just going to drag it down a bit. And the general rule of thumb is whenever you're working with elements that are actually bigger, you don't want to have this looking smaller because it puts less significance on the actual button itself. So I can remember that our text boxes actually had a width of 0.75. So we're going to head into our size and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to say 0.75, 0, 0.2, 0. Now 0.2 is a little bit thick, so we're going to use 0.15 yet again. So you can see now they're looking the exact same size. We're actually going to head into our last text box and we're going to grab all three of these and we're going to duplicate them and drag them into our text button, just so we have the nice same presets that we had before. You can see it's looking a little bit ugly now, but we can just change that. So head back into your text button and go back onto the background color. Now, for submit buttons and stuff, you kind of want to make it like a nice sort of green, but not too dark that it's daunting on the player. So I sort of go with this sort of color. Next, we actually need to change our text size and our text font. So I'm going to head onto our font face, Rodoka 1, text color, make that pure white, and then I am going to scale my text. Change the text to something like send, and there you go. Now you have a fully built GUI ready for you to script, ready for you to do everything in. You can always rename these to however you want, change the colors however you like. This is just how I personally do it. This was just a copy from my last video. So hopefully I've shown you today that it really is simple. It's easy to do. It's easy to learn. All you really need to think about is UI corner, UI stroke. Just drill it into your brain. Just make sure you have that in your head when you're creating your GUI. Make sure to always be doing it by scale, not by offset. Those are the main three things you want to consider. And I hope that this video really helped you out and you learned something new today. So if it did, please make sure to like and subscribe. Leave any comments or concerns down below, and I'll see you all next time.